G'day, ZiggyD here with another Path of Exile guide. In this video I want to talk about socket crafting. Now most of you guys, even the newer players to the game, probably know how the basics of using the different socket crafting currency. You know what Jeweler's Orbs do, you know what Chromatics do, you know what Orb of Fusings do, and you know a few little things about that. But there's some finer points to the socket crafting system and some general advice I can share with some of you that I think you might find helpful, and maybe some of the more experienced players will find this a little bit interesting too. So, first, I tend to do quite a bit of socket crafting in Path of Exile, and usually my luck has not been that great. A lot of you guys who watched me do the 1 week race saw that I tend to end up using a lot of currency crafting sockets, a lot more than I probably should. So in the end, above all else, RNG is going to RNG. You know, the game is completely random. Although you can kind of estimate some things and have a bit of an idea of how things work, sometimes it's just going to take you a lot more currency than you would expect to get the right sockets for your gear. That said, I still do like to socket craft quite often when I find a nice helmet or something like that when I'm leveling and I need to make that a 4-link. I'd much rather make a nice helmet a 4-link than to try and make a 4-link helmet a nice helmet. So generally if I find something with good stats, I'll try and link it up. Usually making a 4-link isn't actually that hard, but obviously getting into like 5 and 6 links gets a lot harder, and I tend to buy those myself because the currency required to go into those ends up to be a little bit more. So, let's talk about some of the basics. First, I want to talk about socket colors. This is one that I think a lot of people don't really know that much about. So, socket colors are, you know, at the very base level, random. Whenever you use a chromatic, you get a random set of colors back. So I got red and 3 green that time. If I use it again, you know, I'll got red and 3 green again, but on different locations. So each one is random. However, there are a few things that go into determining what actual colors are more likely to roll than others. So, this is something you guys probably know, or some of you guys probably know this. If you have like a base item type that is, say, evasion, like this one, or green or dex based item, so this is a bow which is a dex based item and has 185 dex requirements. This is quite a high level bow. Now, generally these ones are much more likely, so dex based items or evasion based items are much more likely to roll green sockets. That's why you see a 6 socket here, which I just found on the ground, just happened to spawn with 6 green sockets. That's because each one of these is very likely to spawn. Now if I had chuck a chromatic on one of these guys, I only got 1 red. You know, although each one had a random chance of spawning, you know, could have randomly spawned any colors, on average most of them are going to end up being green. Now here's something a lot of people don't know. That actually is determined based on the numerical value next to the dex. So the higher the dex rating on item, the more likely it is to spawn green sockets. So if you're trying to craft a bow with a lot of blue sockets on it or a lot of red sockets on it, maybe you're going like a blood magic character, you need maybe weapon elemental damage, you need life leech, you need blood magic, maybe you even want like added fire, and then that's 4 red sockets. Getting 4 red sockets on a green bow is very difficult. So then the best thing to do is to try and find a bow, a dex bow, that is a little bit lower dex requirement. In fact, you can actually get a blue citadel. So say I had this bow here and I had reduced attribute requirements as a mod on it, that would actually reduce the amount of dex and would actually make me slightly more likely to roll off color sockets, and that's something a lot of people take advantage of when trying to craft items with a lot of off colors. So as I said, getting 4 red sockets on this is very unlikely. Getting 5 red sockets on this, highly unlikely. And if I need to get like a mixture of reds and blues, that's going to be very unlikely. So let's just like rip 5 chromes into this. We got 1 blue that time around, 2 reds. That's, you know, that's not too uncommon. 1 red there. We're unlikely to see more than, you know, 2 or 3 off color just after over a few chromatics. So back to 6 green there. Highly likely we've got 2 off colors there. So even getting something like 4 off colors on this is very unlikely. So don't even bother trying to sink all of your chromes into a dex-based item, trying to get like 5 blues or 3 blues and 2 reds or something like that, because you're going to have a very hard time. That moves into the thousands of chromatics range to try and do things like that. I actually saw someone who had a Chevron's Wrappings, which is a blue item. You know, it's a blue-oriented item. It has very high int requirements, and they had all off colors on it, which is like winning the lottery twice, having a 6-link shavs dropping and it being all off colors. So that drop was pretty crazy, but that's just an interesting little side note. So obviously, by the same note, things that are split armor and evasion, these have strength and dex. Now these are pretty equally, because it's 57 strength, 57 dex, it's pretty equally likely to roll greens and reds. If we sink a few into this, you know, we got all reds that time, we got a red and a green, we got 2 blues that time, which is actually a little bit less likely. We're getting a few blues there. Green and red, green and red. Most of the time you're going to see more greens and reds than anything else. And there we go, we ended up with 2 on each side there. Green and red. Now, but because the strength and dex totals are lower on split items, so any split items generally have lower requirements. So if I take all my gems out of my 5-link here, for example, because this is a split dex intelligence item, so dexterity intelligence item, it only has a high of 86 dex, 86 int. That means you're much more likely to get off colors on this than you are on something like a pure evasion piece, or say this is a pure armor piece that has a 114 strength requirement. This is much more likely to roll red sockets, so it's going to be harder to get those off colors on that. So although this is more strongly likely going to get green and blue sockets because it's an evasion energy shield type or a strength, or a dex int type, you still have a bit better chance of getting those red sockets on it. So if you're trying to get something that has an interesting combination of colors, maybe you need a couple red, a couple blue, and a couple green on your one, then you're probably going to be much more easily or much more likely to get it if you're using a split item type. And split item types are very popular for that reason. Lots of people use armor ES types because both of the requirements are a bit lower. You can more easily get like a few extra, green sockets on there if you need them. So that's pretty interesting to know. We can actually see that effect really closely here on this particular item here. This is what I like to call a troll item, and it took me a while to figure this out actually, and this is what made me sort of do a bit more research into this system. I actually had, I think it was my Aussies gloves. Let me take these out here, or my Aussie gloves. I think this was the ones that might have made me start thinking about it. Okay, these were the ones that made me start thinking about it. 29 strength, 29 dex. I was trying to get, red and green sockets on this, but I kept getting a lot of blues. I was thinking, why is this? Why am I getting trolled so hard by these gloves? And I finally learned why that was when I started trying to craft my Reel the Storm Shell. I'm like, okay, armor evasion. This is an armor evasion base. I kind of knew in my head that armor evasion, most likely to roll green and red sockets. I should have no trouble getting 3 red sockets on this. I may regret what I'm about to do, but look at this. Blues, there's some green and reds, there's some green and reds, there's some blue and greens, blue and reds. This looks entirely random to me. I'm getting lots of blues here. Lots of blues. Although this is, I could have a streak here. I'm getting chromatic items, getting lots of blues. Blues seem to be coming up, look, 3 blues, just as often as everything else. Rep chromatics. But the reason for that is, it actually has no requirements, no stat requirements. So pay careful attention to the actual stat requirements of items when trying to chrome items, because they you could get trolled by a low level one if you're using like a low level unique or something like that. Even something like the Aussies gloves, because it has pretty low strength and dex, was trolling with quite a few blues, and this is why I thought I was super unlucky with crafting a lot of the time, when in fact I was just doing crafting wrong. I was doing the socket crafting wrong. You really want to know that these ones, are likely to roll. This is just as likely to roll blues as it is greens and reds, even though it's armor evasion, because it doesn't have any strength or dex requirements. So really pay close attention to those strength and dex requirements, or those int requirements, and you'll know just kind of like a rough idea of how likely you are to get off colors. And if you're trying to get 4 red on a green chest piece, a green 6-link, then you might have some tough times there, and you might need to stock up on quite a few chromatics, or consider getting a different item type, base item type. So that's the main thing I wanted to make about this video, but I also wanted to talk about crafting your sockets. So let's try and Alright, so as I've said before, crafting 4 links isn't too hard to do. It used to be a lot harder, but in a recent patch it was made 25% more likely to get. So crafting like a 4-link item now involves 2 things. Let's say this is a really well rolled Samite helmet. Now if it had 4 sockets, then that's pretty good. It's pretty easy to go ahead and link that. The currency cost generally I find to be around 5 fusings, not usually much higher than that. And that can convert roughly to be like 5 alks, but not too bad if it's a really nice helmet. However, if we need to start sinking jewelers into it, then we might want to consider that it's not worth it. Now, the easiest way to understand how much jeweler cost is, because people tend to not really understand how much jewelers are actually worth, is to talk to Clarissa here. And you can see that you can actually buy orbs of fusings for 4 jewelers. This gives you a rough idea of how much these are worth. So, firstly, I do tend to use this recipe quite a bit when I am trying to link something. I'll one at a time convert my jewelers to fusings, to use the fusings to try and get the linkages I need. But in the end, it's a good idea to know this sort of conversion rate here, because that gives you a good idea of how many you might actually need to invest. And let's just have a rough crack at it here. We could get lucky, but we'll see how many it takes us to get 4 sockets. So we got it in just over 1 fusing there, and we got 4 sockets. That felt about right. that didn't feel too bad. It didn't feel too lucky or too unlucky. It might take a few more, a few less, and of course you can get on a bad RNG streak and get nothing at all. Now, in my experience, I usually, as I said, I get them in 4 to 5 fusings or something like that. So that's about 1 ALK worth of currency we spent there. There's a 3 link. There's a 2-2. There's nothing. So what I'll do is I'll usually buy a fusing here. And you want to really, once we're up to this point, we're pretty committed now. This is the gambler's fallacy here. We're like, oh no, so many ALKs getting ripped into it. All right, there we go. We got it in like 6 or 7, I think. We 4-linked our Samite helmet. Rip currencies, but it's all for the purpose of education. So think about this before you actually go into your socket crafting, whether that helmet is worth that amount. You may be better off going and buying a 4-link instead that already has some stats rolled on it with PoE XYZ or something like that. But obviously, a lot of the stuff I've done recently was like in the 1-week race and things like that. You don't really have any choices there. You kind of just have to rip your currency into stuff because there's not many actual items about. But if you're playing in like the longer term leagues, really think about how many ALKs or how many Chaos, probably better to think of it, you're actually going to have to invest in 4-linking an item that has good stats. So if it has really good stats, then it may be worth, what did I just spend, like about 3-4 Chaos worth of currency linking that? Try to think, is this helmet actually worth that extra 3 to 4 Chaos there? And maybe that'll help influence your decision there. And sometimes you can actually get better deals just by buying a 4-link. I tend to see 4-linked like good rares up where the 4-link isn't actually really considered in the price. So hopefully that helps you guys out. Hopefully especially the socket color thing helps you out, because I know learning that has helped me moving forwards. But anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.